Okay, good evening everyone, and welcome to our final Bristol Schools Forum of this academic year. I hope everyone's well. I know it's the second to last week at the end of term, so no doubt people are looking forward to a break when we get there. So we've got a number of items on the agenda today to take us through. Rena's going to give us a verbal update, and then we've got a few papers to consider. They're all information items, so we're not making any decision making tonight, but we have got a few things that it's worth us touching base on and giving some support and feedback to the council to take us into the summer. Just as a reminder, we are streamed live on Zoom, so the chat function doesn't work. So if you do want to wait for each of the sections and raise your hand, either virtually or an actual hand, that's fine. We'll keep an eye on that, and Simon supports with that one, and we'll feedback, allow everyone to contribute at different points of the meeting. First of all, just say thank you for Simon, who chaired the meeting in my absence last time. Thank you very much for that. In terms of standing items, Claudette, could you update us on vacancies, apologies, and ask for declarations of interest, please?
Thank you, Chair. So for the apologies that are shared, we have Cameron Shaw, Melanie Bounce, Stephanie Williams, Kate Matheson, Steve Hornsby, Joe Willis and Marion Curran, and Councillor Asher Cray sends her apologies. She's on council business. And as you know, because St Barnabas School is closing, we will have a vacancy with a primary head of a maintained school, and we're going to have the primary governor maintained school, both who represented St Barnabas. And I've just heard, Tracy, you're on. I think you shared that you well, I don't know if you're changing roles, but you're not able to participate.
Yeah, I'm moving to a different role, and so a different local authority. So apologies, this will be my last forum.
Oh, thank you very much. So I've noted that, your resignation there. Thank you. Although we have no votes today, it's all information reports, so no declaration of interest, so I won't seek those. In respect to the vacancies, Chair, what I've done is I've sent an advert for the head's newsletter and to be circulated via the governor's email forum that exists, because I've counted, well, for 5 vacancies. Now there's 6, because we're going to need another primary head of academy now. Tracy is stepping down, so I will adjust that advert and update it and send off for possible people with interest. So I've put my email down in respect to the possible interest, and I've given them the dates of the meeting, and I have said that the meetings are virtual meetings. I don't know, do we have one that is in person in the during the academic year, Chair? Or
I think due to COVID, we have been largely virtual. I think there's still an ambition to have one in person each year, which I think would be helpful just for connection, etc. And yes, sometimes that normally lends itself better to the autumn period when there is quite a lot of decision making, but sometimes that's easier to do in person. So yes, no concrete position on that one, but more of an ambition, I think.
Well, so I put that in the advert because I thought it may garner some interest, because I know how busy you all are in respect of time and location and moving from where you are across the city in our traffic to basically City Hall. So hopefully we may get some interest. So that concludes my bit. Over to you, Chair. Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much, Claudette. Cedric, I'll just come to you in 2 seconds. Just want to say thank you very much, Tracy, and your contribution to Forum, and I wish you lots of luck in your new role. In terms of vacancies, just so we're all aware, Claudette, can I just check? So it's 2 primary maintained heads.
I have 1 academic secondary governor, 1 maintained primary head, 1 maintained primary governor, 1 academic primary governor, and 1 special academic head.
Academy, I think.
Yes, academy head.
Wonderful. Okay. So thank you very much for promoting those across the board. I think if any colleagues on the forum know of anybody who might be interested, or you could promote that a bit and give a live examples of what we do here, then that would be very much appreciated. Thank you. Cedric.
No, just wanted to mention, hi Sarah, everyone. As of last Friday, I've become governor for Redland Green School, so with a secondary academy. So just something to be captured here in terms of the link with the vacancy available and declaration of interest.
Okay.
Because I'm today sitting only for primary school, so yeah, I will have to think about that, all of this.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, so that takes us through standing items. We've got the minutes. Thank you, Claudette, for those. Is there any comments on the accuracy of them? No. Okay, and I don't think we've got any specific actions from the meetings that we needed to pick up. So unless anyone's wanted to pick up anything from the last meeting, I'll move us on to item 4, which is the update from Rena. Over to you, Rena. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I'll just try and quickly share my screen. You'll have to forgive me. I have a lot of windows open.
And sorry, Claudette, can I just check? There's a member of the Zoom called Constellation something. Can I check what that is? Who that is?
I was just asking them to start their video and to rename themselves. As they're just doing that now, I think. 3 little buttons on the side. Yep, that's that typing. Oh, it is Sam. Hi. We're okay. It's Sam Packer.
Great, thank you, Sam.
Thank you.
Yeah, are you happy for me to? No, I just was waiting for the official nod to continue.
Yes, please.
Wonderful. Thank you, Chair. So thank you, everybody. Tonight I've got a really quick, brief overview in terms of an update, 2 items around family hubs, and 1 very brief around the SEND review, and I will touch upon that in one of the papers around delivering better value, but also just to note that piece of work that's happening, and I will try to give you an update around it. So I think the biggest piece is around family hubs. This is a great piece of work, and I know Simon was at one of the hubs when I went to an opening. So in the last couple of weeks, we saw the opening of 3 of our family hubs, the physical localities. The launch events were, very community-based. It was a great atmosphere. It was representative of the variety of families that we serve. But also seeing some children there, really, really young ones, was delightful. It really brought home the impact of the work that we do and our collective responsibility in terms of raising aspirations, raising attainment, increasing those standards across schools, and doing the right thing at the right time for those young people. So just a massive thank you, essentially, for colleagues that were at the family hubs. Some I saw. Some might have seen me. I apologise if I didn't get to say hello, but I think it was truly representative of the hard work that's happened across children's and education, and hopefully it will be great to see how that work comes into fruition in terms of starting from all the way from birth and how we support families and young people throughout their lives. That'll be a really great piece, and I look forward to updating Schools Forum on that piece of work in the new term. The second one is really brief, and it's literally because of the timing around this. So we have started a review process of SEND, particularly around the EHCP processes, and the rationale behind this is looking at those improvements for our families, and we are looking for that modernised approach, particularly around the SEND and AP improvement plan and what has been set out in there. It just so happens that it aligns itself to it. This piece of work has literally only just started, but I thought I would bring it to Schools Forum just to highlight it and spotlight it for members. And then, Chair, if it's possible, it'd be great to bring this piece of work back in the autumn term, just so that we can see how it's developed, the impact around it, and of course how that will have a direct impact on the deficits that we're carrying, and what that will look like and the forecasting that sits around it. So really brief, but I just wanted to share that piece of work.
Okay.
Wonderful, thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Rena. Any questions at all on those couple of updates for us? It's good to see the Family Hubs work starting to progress.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay. So no comments on that one. Thank you very much, Rena. So Angel, I think you're the next item, which is our update on the Dedicated Schools Grant, DSG, as at period, where are we? Period 2? Yeah, that's the one. Over to you, please. Just give us the highlights and some of the key points from the paper. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Chair. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for being here. It's gone past 5 now, so I'll keep it brief. So this is the first financial report on the financial year 23-24. Obviously, it's the last meeting for the academic year. So for financial year 2023-24, we've been allocated DSG funding of £453 million. That's including 256.6 million goes straight to, you know, and for NNDR and for direct funding of high needs places, going to special schools and academy trusts, etc. And so within the 4 blocks, we've done the first forecast as at May 2023. The schools block, at this stage, you know, we don't envisage an in-year deficits or overspend. We're planning to spend all the money. The delegation obviously is a ring-fenced pot of money. You know, it belongs to the school, so we anticipate to spend on budget as well. Central services block and also should be on budget. We did forecast an overspend on early years, mainly because of special education needs, non-statutory top-up within the early years, and that's about £850,000. That's mainly of that. However, I don't know if you're aware of the good news the government has announced last Friday, and the 2-year-old rates will go up by 32%, which is equivalent to £1.95, and that's the universal rates, and that applies in September to March. As it's only come out last Friday, the formal announcement, we have not done the financial assessment. What I'm saying here now, the early years overspend position should improve as the funding rates has improved, and there is a slight uplift in 3 to 4 year as well. But there is the intention is to pass the funding and all the uplifts directly to the providers, and yeah, so the early years position should improve. High needs block, we continue to experience the pressure. We are currently forecasting £16.6 million overspend, in-year overspend, which is broadly in line with what we experienced last year. But within that 16.6, there is also an element of 3.4% high needs additional payments needs to go to special schools, ALPs. We're currently working through in accordance with the high needs operating guidelines. And tomorrow I'm actually having a meeting with my core cities colleagues to make sure that we interpret the guidelines correctly. Our approach is consistent with other core cities, as well. And we will, pass the money on to the schools in a due course in accordance with the guidelines. There are some process and a loop we need to go through, and as per guideline. That's what we're working on now. And last year's overspend of in-year overspend was about £15 million. That did not include the backlog either. So just to bear that in mind. So 16.6 is pretty much, more or less in line with the level of overspend we are anticipating. And we, obviously, with the support from schools forums members and all of you, and we agreed to transfer £1.6 million from schools block to the high needs block to continue the transformation work. the Education Service has been doing, and we have got the draft mitigation proposals, an element of it, which you probably suspected that will need formal consultation. So we're currently working with in the process of procuring the partners on that one. So in the high needs transformation, if you look at page 14, and there is a table, you see the 0.9 million pound overspend, and that's just to clear that's a planned overspend, and there are money carried forward from the previous years we didn't spend. So we anticipate fully utilizing the money and to implement the transformations we needed to bring DSG back to the sustainable footing. And that's all 4 blocks talked through. And I don't know if there's anything else anyone wants to ask. Oh, there's something else I could mention as well, which is in my report. You probably read about just to remind you that LA maintained schools overspend is not included in the DSG overspend position. The reason being is DSG is capturing the money. Department of Education gave it to the local authority, and how much money we pass to the schools. And the difference is the overspend on DSG block, whereas LA maintained schools, their budget position and the surplus or deficit positions sits within the school, so it's not reported in that table you see just about 3.1 on the agenda packs on page 14, just to remind you on that. Again, the latest forecasts for all the LA maintained schools, we are anticipating in year deficit of £1.5 million, of which so about 24 of our maintained schools are anticipating a year deficit. So what we've been doing with the schools is for nursery schools, we've been having meetings, bespoke meetings with schools to ensure that they come up with robust plans to bring their finance back to the sustainable footing. And we also deliver trainings to upskill our colleagues to make sure that the financial acumen and financial awareness is improving. So we actually delivered a governance training for primary and maintained nursery schools on 27th of June. So whoever colleagues, if you attended, any comments, we're working on this together, and we will help you in every step to improve the financial position. I think that's it from me, really.
Okay, thanks very much, Angel. I think Sam's got a question, and I'll ask more of a general one.
It's just really for the early years funding that's coming through to support the 9-month-olds and the new children that are going to get their funding. Do you know when any information will be released about that? Will it come out from sort of Deborah Brown, or is that something that we just, so is it just something we have to wait to hear?
The uplist I've mentioned earlier on is actually on public domain, and the ESFA website already announced it, but I haven't read it in detail myself. But I've got the headline figures. The 2-year-old universal hourly rate increased from £6 to £7.95. So there's a £1.95 per hour for the universal hours. Yeah, and that element has increased. A 3 to 4-year-old and got another 33p uplift, and supplement funding per hour again gone up by 24p. And those are those new rates apply between September to March 2023. So starts take effect in September 2023. Yeah, so you get April to March is the rates you already know, but the new rates apply from September to March. Yeah, from September
Yeah.
onwards.
I believe there's some capital funding or funding going to be available for us to increase our places. Is that the case?
You can apply for capital funding. Yes, you need to apply it yourself, the school. Yeah.
Okay.
Obviously, local authority has one pot of education capital funding, but that's for a specific purposes. Yeah.
Yeah, the situation many of us are faced with at the moment, and I'm going to use myself as an example, is we're 60% full with a waiting list of 100 children that we can't take because of staffing. We have just taken some measures to improve that, of which I'm going to share with colleagues in our sector. It's not necessarily going to be available to everybody, and it's not necessarily a choice that everybody will want to make, but we've taken a visa sponsorship license. Is that something that we could use, or I could advise colleagues that they could access to use them, so that we can encourage colleagues from overseas to join us?
I think that's one for you, Rena, if you're able to confirm what the approach is from the council on maintained nurseries.
I think what I'd have to do, Sam, is take the question away and just do my due diligence around process. I was thinking really quickly then, but I don't want to say something and then it not be accurate. So if we could take that one offline, I'd appreciate it. And then I can go, well, I say the collective I'm sure officers can go away and find out the detail, but also check that process for you.
Thank you. I'm happy to have a side conversation with you direct to let you know what we've done. And we've used a company to help us go through the motions, but I do think it will help many of us with our recruitment processes. Yeah. But yeah, happy to share that with anybody as well anyway, once we can. Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Sam.
Great, and thanks, Sam. And I think that's important, that because we know that the financial challenges in our nurseries as well as other challenges too. So having that opportunity to learn where different approaches have worked well would be helpful to know. So if we could put that as an action, Claudette, please, so we can follow up probably outside the meeting, but just so we've noted it in the minutes, please. Simon?
Yeah, thanks. There was a couple of points really. I kind of thought, like Sam, maybe you were also referring to the new offer that's been suggested, where we don't have any idea at all what the rates are going to be. Is that correct? Like, because we're already having parents coming in saying registering for what they are expecting the new entitlement to be next year from what was promised from the government, and we don't really have any information to give people on that. And I don't know when that's, well, it's all a bit unclear, but there obviously is a big issue around sufficiency going forward if the offer is extended to the degree that it has been promised. And the other point is, whilst the the uplift in funding is very welcome and has made a big difference for this year, really, where things are so tight, particularly the increase in the 2-year-old funding, which is a significant increase, and that particularly helps the areas of deprivation where the majority of the children are on the free entitlement as well. So the funding for that is helpful and makes a big difference. But I think, Angel, going forward, like, what I think most most nurseries are struggling to do is to balance the books, to not have an in-year deficit. But in terms of repaying deficits that have built up, there's so much that is in our control and there's so much that isn't. And it's still like it's going to be an ongoing process, which will involve decisions that nursery school head teachers and governing bodies can't make by themselves, because it depends on system change and integrated services and things working together. So I think that needs to be a longer term plan, and it's not something that can be addressed by schools in the short term. Whereas trying to balance in-year budgets can be addressed in the short term. There is a much longer term issue on how services are delivered in Bristol. I mean, is that recognised by?
Absolutely. We do recognise, the scale of the challenge within the, nurseries, and the historic deficits, for certain schools are particularly high. And this is why, we have taken bespoke approach, and, meeting with individual schools, investigating and exploring options with them. I think absolutely agree with you. First step is to reach in-year balanced budget position. However, the deficit does sit with the school, and so in longer term to assure that long-term financial sustainability, and to make sure that we are here to support the communities, we have to make sure that we're delivering our services sustainably. So, and as well as we working with you on reaching the in-year balanced budget position, we also have been, talking to colleagues, looking into medium to long-term financial plans. For instance, the government announced of, increased hours. What's the impact? Looking at your infrastructure, looking at your resources. What does it look like for you in 3 to 5 years? There is the opportunities in the market. We are experiencing the financial challenges, but equally it's an opportunity for us collectively looking at our offerings. How are we going to compete effectively financially, but also, providing the service needed for the communities. And it's a collective piece. It's not 1 to 2 years job. It can be done. We have to continuously doing the horizon scanning piece, making sure that we're capturing the policy and statutory requirement challenges, and B, we're balancing our books. Yeah, we're doing that simultaneously. Yeah, and we're more than happy to support the schools. Yeah. I mentioned earlier on, upskilling colleagues, improve financial awareness, business acumen is our priorities as well. So we've delivered about 3 trainings this year already, and we'll continue to support colleagues to do that. And we will work alongside early years colleagues as well under the direction of Rena, to make sure that we're supporting the schools. This is a collective ownership, the interventions, could be earlier, to be honest with you, but we missed our opportunity now, and we are where we are, but we are in this together. We will work this through.
Thank you.
Yeah. Does that answer your question?
Mm-hmm. Is that okay, Simon?
Yeah, it answers my question, and it also kind of, I mean, as I say, it's an ongoing process going forward, and I think it's something we do have to work with together across the city, because in some ways, when everything's very financially tight and you're looking at reducing to save money, but at the same time the challenge is also to expand to meet the need, and that's a real tension. And that's why I think it needs to be a kind of wider system change, because you can't reduce and expand at the same time without everything else changing, if you see what I mean. It's not, the solution does not lie in an individual school or just an individual couple of schools. It's a wider thing. So whilst you can look at every individual school and make sure that that is running efficiently and financially aware and not wasting money, etc., but that on its own isn't enough.
No.
So that's the point I'm making. But yeah, no, thanks. You have answered it. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks, Simon. Rena.
If I may, Chair, I just wanted to maybe share a little bit of the exploratory and research-based response that might help with what you're raising, Simon. So I completely acknowledge that it is a system-wide issue. You make a really fair point. It is something that I've been looking into in terms of what does that wider solution look like? How do we start to find a more creative solution rather than the financial one? It's got to work hand in hand. It's got to be that fine dance between the efficiencies and deficit recoveries, but also then how do we then future-proof these settings, because our young people need them. And so I've been looking into just a couple of opportunities. It's been purely being exploratory, but you know, I'm hoping that in the next academic year that I'll be able to bring a little bit of support that will enable settings to just be a little bit more creative in terms of their future proofing and their sustainability. And because I don't have concrete answers for you today, I recognise that I'm skirting around the issue, but it's just to provide that reassurance to members that I am looking at it. It is on my horizon. You know how passionate I am about early years. So yeah, I'm working on it.
Thank you, Rena. I think we all would absolutely support anything that we could do that's innovative in that space to support the ongoing provision and meeting the need, which is ever increasing, of course. Well, thank you very much, Angel, for your paper. I think we obviously have a DSG update at every meeting, and there are large figures that we talk through, and I think it's important that we don't become complacent as such at the size and the scale of some of those numbers. With the overspend of 18.5 million, carry forward of 40 million, forecast at 58 million by the end of this financial year. That's why we've got the Delivering Better Value programme and why we're doing all those things in that space. So it's important that we keep aware of that issue and support colleagues at the council around how we can manage that better going forward. So thank you, and thank you for the update on the maintained school balances as well, and the work that you're doing in that space too. I think, again, that's another piece that's very helpful to have an update on, because I know that's a concern for many too. Any other questions on that paper, that section specifically? Any other comments? No, okay, thank you very much, Angel. So the next one is the Delivering Better Value in SEND resourcing. So Rena, over to you.
Thank you, Chair. I appreciate that. What I won't do is go over what Delivering Better Value is, but I will point colleagues just to page 19 and page 20. And if they require any more detail, obviously I'm always available to take your questions. But we also have the Schools Forum paper back in March, which gave us some real insight and detail in terms of what is the Delivering Better Value programme. But for the review purposes, just so that we can acknowledge that the Delivering Better Value has 2 work streams that exist within it, following the diagnostic piece of work that Newton completed on behalf of the DFE. So the first work stream is very much about strengthening those relationships with schools, families, children, and improving those experiences of children with SEND in mainstream settings. And this work stream I'll go into in terms of what it will actually look like, what does it mean, and what can we see that is happening around it. And then we have work stream 2, and this is really about those robust processes, the transparency, the consistency around monitoring and the accountability, and then what that looks like in terms of the high needs block and the non-statutory top-up funding, standardisation of top-up funding for special schools, and then of course our post-16 funding and counterparts and what that will look like. So progress to date for us has meant that we have been able to really focus on work stream 1 as well as work stream 2. Work stream 2 I will get to in a moment because I had a period of procurement and we have to follow due process around that. So with work stream 1 and work stream 2, it's to provide colleagues with the acknowledgement that we have that governance that sits in place. The DSG programme is part of our wider Our Families programme, which is our governance within the local authority in terms of the transformation that exists within children's and education. So the Our Families programme brings together all that change activity that exists. And we have multi-professionals that sit around that in terms of cross-directorate work. So our health colleagues attend. We have members from the NHS that attend. We also have data insight teams that attend. So it is multifaceted in terms of the skill set that sits around that table and feeds up into that governance and holds us to account around the impact to date, the spend that has occurred as well, but also what has been the delivery of the programme. So all of our programs around transformation sits with our Director of Transformation. But what we have done is we've been able to bring in a resource with an external consultant who's had significant experience in terms of SEND nationally, and the work that they've done with SEND services, and the impact that they've had around it. So we've recruited a consultant who is known as our strategic program manager, and they oversee our DSG programs. As colleagues will recognise, the Dedicated Schools grant deficit is large. We have 14 programs that sit under our mitigations plan. I know colleagues will have seen that at other school forums, but for us, we need to have that forensic oversight in terms of what the impact is, where is that emerging practice, how can we replicate any of the better practice that's coming through, but also having the oversight of ensuring that we're getting the desired impact around it. So for me, I think that's been a great asset to add to our piece of work around delivering better value. With our work stream 1, we are planning our first workshop, or we've had our first workshop, I should say, early July, where the work stream 1 is really a test and learn type model, where we're looking at best practice that we can implement, but also having it truly co-produced. So as you can see from page 22, 4.5, we have both internal and external partners, officers at that workshop. We have parent carer support, health practitioners as well, to really shape what those projects will look like. And then that will take flight and delivery in September. And for me, I think this is where we can really collaborate with some strong practice that happens across the city. I know that everyone is working for that same agenda around SEND and wanting the experience to be better for the young people. That's who we are accountable to, that's who I serve. So for me, working with wider partners is key, and will be integral to, I would say, sustainable work that happens and how we continue that beyond the Delivering Better Value programme. With work stream 2, we have been through our procurement process. As colleagues will recognise, we have to have a 6-week, approximately 6-week procurement window, where partners can then submit their papers around this. We then have to follow due process in terms of going through each partner that may have applied via workstream 2 to be working alongside us. We then have to have an evaluation process, and then we have to have a moderation process. So all of this will take time, but for me, due diligence is required around it. So we're at the point where we should be firming up who our procured partner is for workstream 2 in order for that piece of work to take place. I would really like to draw colleagues' attention to 4.6 on page 22, particularly around the delivery partner. So once we have procured our independent delivery partner, they will create and develop an options paper outlining potential changes that I discussed in terms of what workstream 2 will focus on. And that options paper is key because this isn't being dictated by the local authority, but more about the need in the city and the experiences that we need to be able to put in place for our young people. So following the completion of the options paper, we then have to go through that multi-stakeholder consultation period, which is approximately 6 weeks. And then at that point, we have to collate our findings around that consultation and use that to then inform the final recommendations, which is then presented at Cabinet. So the timeline that we're working towards is those recommendations to be submitted to Cabinet and go to Cabinet, I should say, in December. There is a large proportion of the £1 million that was given to the Delivering Better Value work that has been allocated to the procurement of the delivery partner and the work that they will complete. So as you can imagine, it's ensuring that this work sticks to time and that we are following the due processes that exist. But for me, I think it will be an exciting piece of work. September will be another touch point for me to bring back where we're at, what we've done, who that procured partner is, and then what that options appraisal work looks like. And that's the end of the paper, Chair. I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much, Rena. Tonya.
Hi, thank you for that, Rena. I just wanted to ask about recruitment and attrition as part of that plan going forward within the education sector. So a lot of this, especially work stream 1, is dependent on partners within schools kind of supporting one another and so on, and learning best practice. However, there doesn't appear to be a recognition of the fact that there is a lot of staff leaving the profession. And how do we, with a dwindling workforce, I'm hoping it'll be reversed, but even today, some of the headlines from the NFER were saying that even if the 6.5% pay increase is agreed by government, it still won't account for the mass vacancies that are in teaching at the moment. So is there any plans to incorporate that into any of the future models going forward, about the fact that the workforce might be reduced and constricted, in which case what can be done then to improve those partnership workings and things like that, and supporting colleagues when we're having to do more? Again, like what Simon was saying, was more with less, but this time we're not talking financially, we're talking kind of in terms of people and skills.
Yeah, I mean, you know, you've already said yourself, this is a systemic issue. You know, it is definitely bigger than me in my role. However, what can I do in terms of Bristol? So the workforce action plan that sits around this isn't solely within SEND. We've got a wider plan that exists across both children's and education. We've got internal officers who are working with a multitude of different colleagues in-house, but also externally. A piece of work that an officer within a head of service within my team has completed, a scoping activity. They are now taking a look at where the DSV fit into this, where our key networks fit into this. So it is a wider plan. It won't be solved overnight, as you know, but this is where we need to think quite strategically, and we need to think cross-directorate as well, because it impacts, if we take SEND for an example, it impacts everybody, not just education, also social care, but also our health colleagues. And so we've got to take a look at similar queries and questions that Sam raised earlier in terms of where is our workforce? You know, what is the impact of Brexit? What is the impact of cost of living? And taking all of this into account. There's some emerging practice coming through with our children's social care colleagues and the work that they're doing around workforce. And it's taking a look at whether that is viable to replicate within education and how we go about that. So a long answer to your question is, yes, there is a focus on it in the local authority. Yes, we are focusing on it. No, it won't sit solely within the delivering better value, but it will have an impact on DBV and also SEND.
Yeah, thank you for raising that, because it is wider than SEND, and I think it's just one of those things. I know individual schools, individual organisations are trying to really fill that gap, and they're really working hard to recruit and attract people, but it'd be really nice to have a Bristol-wide approach to make it attractive for everyone to come in and work in Bristol. So yeah, I'm glad that's been kind of acknowledged. Thank you.
Yeah, not a problem.
Thank you very much, Tony. I think that's a really good idea. Like you say, it's a Bristol solution to a recruitment challenge, and what we can do in that space will be actually really quite interesting, exciting, hopefully, and helps to fill some of those vacancies that I know we're all managing at the moment. Are there any other questions at all for Rena? I just wanted to pick up on a couple. In workstream 1, you mentioned that there will be a number of priority schools to take part in the project, and you mentioned that's based on inclusion data. How will that be worked through, and how many schools do you anticipate will be involved in this initial stage?
So
if you know
colleagues, I think colleagues are looking at a fair process as to how we are identifying those schools. So they're currently taking a look at the data. I would say it's happening as we speak, if I'm being honest. A lot of conversations have been around that this week for me and the strategic lead. So we want to make it a fair process and ensure that, you know, it goes wide across the city as well. And I'm very aware of localities and the needs across those localities, and I think it's important to acknowledge those. But colleagues have been tasked with a fair process needs to be designed in order to identify who these schools are.
Thank you. And no ideas of how many at this stage?
I don't want to be held to that number, but what I can do, Chair, is take that away, ask the officers involved, and then answer it as part of an action.
Yeah, thank you. That would be great.
Very welcome.
And then for work stream 2, I'm just conscious that we do quite a lot of funding consultations in the autumn term as well. So I think that was just a flag to say that we might be consulting schools on a range of things in the autumn period, which often can be quite busy. So just to flag that.
Of course.
Because we want to get good responses, don't we? So thinking about how we set those up would be helpful, I think.
Yeah, definitely. And I think if there was, if there's the option to not have consultation fatigue, then that's definitely needed. But I'm very aware of the accountability that sits around this, and obviously not only just feeding back to colleagues around the virtual table here today, but also the Department for Education have milestones as to where I have to feed back to them around the impacts of the work. But I will definitely take that back to officers and spotlight that consultation fatigue is real. We need to acknowledge it, and what can we do to counteract it?
Thank you. That's really helpful. Okay. Anything else from anyone? No. Okay. Thank you, Rena. That's really helpful to have that update at this stage, and look forward to hearing a bit more next time. And then you're also going to update us on the next paper, which is the early years SEND panel, and that's just for us to note the progress to date. So over to you, please.
Yeah, so as colleagues will see, and I'm very conscious that Simon Holmes, you are very much the expert in this area, so feel free to jump in if and when needed. But as you can see, we've got some background information that I think is really important on page 24 that just outlines what is required from a local authority in terms of SEND inclusion fund to support children with emerging special educational needs in the early years setting. There is some strong practice that happens in early years, and that needs to be replicated and shared. For me, the biggest indicator around that is their use of review that happens in terms of how the funding is allocated, and then when the review time happens with that funding. So 3.2 all the way through to 3.4 gives us an overview in terms of funding, in terms of how the early years SEN panel works, the due diligence that sits around the universal descriptors before making any decisions in terms of how funding is allocated. But then for me, I think it's drawing colleagues' attention to 3.6, which is really key. Funding is allocated for a specific length of time. And then at that point, after 6 months, a review takes place to then monitor and take a look at the use of funding. And this is a key, I would say, strong practice that happens because, as we know, growth is not linear. Children don't work in a linear way, and we need to be able to intervene as early as possible, hence why we're taking a look at those 6-month windows. A lot of development and growth happens within the early years age range of our young children. But for me, I think those annual reviews that occur and looking at the funding and equating them both is key. And definitely SEND as a whole, we take a look at that funding practice and we're trying to refine that. As we can see on page 26, I think the pressures are really clear in section 4. And I know colleagues around the virtual screen will echo these, I am sure, in terms of increasing numbers of children, children deferring and delaying entry into school, the funding streams, as Simon picked up on earlier, and what those look like, but also with the SEND panel budget, it currently doesn't receive any contribution from that high needs block. So it's just flagging that for colleagues, but also how children are supported in terms of statutory guidance, and how the free early education entitlement hours work. So the pressures, may seem, I would say, common across the pressures that we feel within the early years sector, but also within education. But it's worth acknowledging that they have a direct impact, but it's a case of, well, what are we doing about it? And I know, Chair, you were really clear around a previous action in terms of the 250,000 and how that was being used to reduce that annual overspend within early years SEN. So what officers have done is they've outlined really clearly what the project work has been, the description of that project work, and then they've broken down the cost that occurs around it. And for me, it really is around the professional development that's been shared, how we're taking a look at utilising the task and finish group that's responsible for reviewing audits that have taken place, but also informing that redesign of early years SEN panel processes, at the impact of governance and where that comes into it. So the early years, SEND project plan is incorporated into the SEND strategic partnership plan. And that SEND strategic partnership plan held by both education colleagues, health colleagues, and children's social care colleagues. And so we've got that cross-directorate work, but also oversight of it. And that SEND strategic partnership plan then goes to SEND strategic partnership group, which then feeds up to the highest governance in terms of the SEND improvement board, and then that then continues on to health and wellbeing board. So we've got that direct route through in terms of that governance. For me, as part of the delivering better value work and those test and learn projects, one of them will be around the ordinarily available provision, and how that document is used, what is mandatory, what is guidance, what is currently fit for purpose in 2023. And so early years colleagues have also found that the ordinarily available provision document needs to reflect more of the early years environment. And so this is where we will have that cross-cutting work of early years also feeding into those test and learn projects. And so for me, the key elements are really around how we continue to develop that ordinarily available provision, how we intend to continue professional development and rolling out any of that best practice that exists, and also promoting that training. These may seem like really simple steps, but actually these are what have significant impact. If we can take a look at the processes in the systems, dovetail that with the professional development that we put in place, then it will enable us to not only demonstrate what that emerging practice is, but how we can then replicate that and share that across the sector, which for me is key and really important. But I try not to give too much detail in terms of the context and the history around it, but I will definitely take any questions. And if I can't answer them, Simon might be able to answer them. And if not, then I'll definitely take them away and bring them back as actions.
Thanks very much, Rena. It's really helpful to see what progress has been made in this space, and there's a really detailed paper covering a few key areas. So thank you for that. Simon? Oh, you're on mute, Simon.
I think I don't feel like I'm an expert at all. I think Rena's gave a really good explanation of what it is, but there was, and I think also highlighted the things that jumped out at me a bit, and that was the numbers, the real steep increase in numbers, and I think particularly the numbers of children that are not going into reception classes being held back a year, and for a variety of different reasons, but often it is because primary schools are saying they cannot meet the needs of children. The parents are then not feeling that the primary school wants their child and coming back to us and saying, can we stay for another year? And I think that isn't actually an issue, because if you're a parent and you go into thinking, well, the primary school can take, and you go there and the impression you get is, well, we don't really want your child, then you're not going to take them there. And that is becoming an issue. We're having children sent back to us saying they've been to the primary school and the primary school thinks they'd be better staying with us. rather than thinking, how can we adapt our school to welcome this child? That's one thing. But then again, there are other children where it is better for them to stay another year. There's a kind of parental choice a bit in this as well, like with the summer born and, you know,
Yeah.
the prime. So it's a complicated issue, but as I think it says it shows in the table, that does have a financial impact on the early years sector, a quite
Yeah.
big financial impact. So I think that is something which is again it's a sort of wider issue, and I think maybe tying it in with the family hubs a bit, where we're looking at, you know, the kind of children's behaviour when it's being seen as SEND, when it's possibly due to trauma, and that's really hard to unpick. And of course, you know, they're saying maybe needing more therapeutic approaches and more nurture spaces. Well, I think, yeah, absolutely we do for the early years. And some children don't cope well in big, busy environments and need smaller, quieter spaces. And how do we create those? And again, that seems to be, you know, a kind of a bit of a bigger issue than individual schools could address. But where are these, you know, are the ways of combining with other services? I'll take one for a very simple one, integrated health checks for 2-year-olds.
Yeah.
I mean, a lot of our children, because of COVID, have come in where they've never seen a health visitor. And for the first time, finding that their children have actually got quite complex, maybe speech delays, etc., etc. Is this due to lack of early experience with stay in play groups, meeting other parents, if we spent a lot of screen time? I mean, there's quite a lot of complex issues. People being, maybe they're thinking, well, my child's autistic, but because it's a communication and language problem, maybe it's not autism, and that child's need is there. So I think, you know, and these are, it's an increasing number, and all my colleagues I've spoken to have said the same. And it's a bigger issue. So I think, you know, that how we join up things to address this is really, really important going forward, because like Tanya said, we're trying to do more with less, and it's more complex, and it has to be working together with other agencies in a more integrated way to meet these families' needs. I think the sort of family hubs is looking like a first step, but then, you know, that's how sustainable are they going forward? Is 3-year funding. So like in terms of future proofing, just wondering, it's a big piece of work, and I'm just thinking, is this also going to be part of what's being analysed or explored within the transformation programs and going forward, like how all of this ties together?
Yeah, and I think it is key in terms of, we can't look at one end of either a phase or a spectrum in terms of like SEND or even just education as a whole. You know, the most logical steps to take are that if we can resolve any of the issues that we're seeing in the early years sector, then that will have a direct impact on transition out into the world of work. And we all know that the key point in any young person, child's life is the quality that they receive within those early years. And I think this is where you're right in terms of, it is cross-cutting. It's not just education. It is where we work alongside health, housing, how we work alongside children's social care. It has to be that multi-professional solution to this. So whereas the delivering better value may not necessarily be highly bespoke in terms of early years, practice will come out of it that we can replicate and that we can adapt. And also we've got the stronger practice hubs, and I think this is how we use the stronger practice hubs in line with family hubs to really have that insight into the work that's needed around it. And you know me, you know better than I do, Simon, the officers that sit behind this piece of work and the strengths and the wealth that they bring with their knowledge around this, but also their passion to ensure that we get it right. But for me, it's got to be cross-directorate, definitely.
Okay. Thanks, Simon. It's really helpful to provide that on the ground context, I think, in terms of what's happening in early years. So appreciate that. Thank you. And thank you, Rena, for coming back on that. Tonya?
Yeah, it's not a question as much, just a response to what Simon was saying, and I think it's just an observation that I can understand that parents are feeling that primaries are kind of turning away their children, or feeling that they don't want them, and so on. I mean, I'm here sitting at the forum representing special schools. However, I do a lot of work with primaries, secondaries, and nurseries as well. And it's maybe there's a bit of a piece of work around the comms around why a child isn't being taken on, because I get the sense that it isn't that they don't want to meet the need, or they can't quite meet the need. It's more that actually sometimes the needs are so complex, or not, especially at that early age, not very clear, that it's a sense of actually, well, what can we do that will best suit these child's needs so that we give them the best start possible? So I think that's where it's coming from, rather than actually we don't want units. And I know you understand that, Simon, but I just think for the wider audience, people who are perhaps watching this thinking, actually, is that what primary feel? Just want to make it clear that it's not. And the second, actually, what you said was really, really interesting, actually, around a trauma being confused with SEND. And I think that's another piece of work, actually, that's worth looking at. Actually, what do we mean by SEND, and what do we mean by a child that's been adversely affected, where if you put the right support in place at whatever phase they're at, then actually they can make just as good educational outcomes. And I think I share your view as well, that those family hubs and that piece of work is really important in reducing maybe the number of pupils who come through, maybe on further along, having EHCPs, or actually what it is something that is a trauma that has changed their brain, the way that they work, but actually putting in those interventions, having that kind of nurture approach, or whatever approach it might be, will actually put them back on track. And rather than being labelled and all of that, then actually it's something that can really support them. And I think there's a really exciting opportunity to do that, but it's only contingent if we're able to expand things like the family hubs, or work with health and social care, so that piece of early work is done. And then what we will end up with is hopefully a reduction in the high needs budget, because actually the work that needs to be done earlier on is done, but it can't be done just by the nurseries or just by the primaries or the secondaries and so on. It has to be that collective approach. So basically, I'm agreeing with everything you're saying, but I think within there, let's not lose that bit of, actually, there's something really powerful about the fact that it can be interwoven with that family hub and that early help right at the beginning.
Okay, thank you very much, both. I know that provides some additional context and some really interesting perspectives for us to take away. Simon, a conscious come back to you, but bear in mind the topic of discussion and the paper that we've just considered.
No, just to make it, just for clarity, yes, it's about its perception, and it's complex, because what is best for the child when they go to a primary school, it's not saying primary schools don't want the children, but then how people receive a message about the complexity of their child's needs, etc., and what's best for them is difficult, and it's a difficult piece of work. And that's why I think it needs a more integrated approach, because it's a bit brutal at the moment, to be honest. That's how it comes across like that to people.
Yeah, thank you, Simon. I think, Rena, that was some helpful additional feedback. Anything else from you?
Not from me, Chair, thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, both. How would you like us to take this one forward, Rena? I know Simon and other colleagues are obviously involved in early years tax and finish group, and etc., etc. Is there anything else that would be helpful from a forum's perspective on this particular topic?
I think it's more about probably what's picked up within the Delivering Better Value work and that SEND review that's occurring, and how that has that impact on early years as well. But obviously any news that I can share in terms of family hubs and the sustainability around it, you know, I can say that yes, the funding is to a certain point. Sustainability has been looked at. You know, it is really important that a strong resource is being put out into the city for that early intervention, ensuring that it's sustainable and we future-proof it, because otherwise, you know, we are accountable to those families and those communities. It's key. So I can assure colleagues that future-proofing piece of financial activity has happened.
Thank you. Sam?
Certainly in our experience at the moment, we're seeing parents who don't really understand the process of children entering reception. They still think it's parental choice. We find that many of our parents who have had some trauma in their families are not willing to always just give the school a chance. I think Simon's absolutely correct with finding that the findings are how a parent is received in a reception class. I think the reception class teachers are quite overwhelmed at times with the numbers that they have entering, especially given as it's unlike some independent schools, it's non-selective entry in the primaries. And also I think a year group difference of development is quite a big area to look at. So I do feel for some of the reception teachers, and I do think, you know, years ago when we had, and some parts of the country still have a phased entry approach, it would be lovely if that was still available in Bristol, as opposed to parents just having a September entry. They have to appeal to be able to keep their child in nursery settings. It is also difficult for the nursery setting when you then have a child that becomes much older within a group. I don't know what the right answer is. Maybe it's another subgroup meeting for Simon and I to join, to at least raise points to support the children, families, and to have some reception teacher representation within that. That would be great.
All right, well, thank you very much, Sam, Tonya and Simon. I know this is obviously a challenging time. I know we're sort of straying away from what is our normal course of business in terms of forum remit, but nonetheless, it's great to hear what's happening. And Rena, obviously you've been taking notes, and we've got a recording of this as well, haven't we? So if you're able to follow up with some colleagues around what we do in that space. So thank you, everyone. Okay, right. Well, we are ahead of time because I knew we were going to have quite a shorter meeting this time. So we are at the final item, which is any other business. So is there anything that anyone would like to raise just before we close for the year? No. Okay, well, I just wanted to say thank you very much to all forum members and to officers, Rena, and others for your support this year. We talk about some really important things in relation to supporting Bristol pupils. So just thank you very much for your time. We'll obviously be starting a new year in September. So we've got the calendar dates that have been shared. So Claudette will send out the diary invites for those shortly, I'm sure, in relation to getting those in everyone's diary. We will aim to have hopefully one meeting in person, which would be good to see if we can facilitate. But I know Angel has run some training sessions as well for any new members. So that's always an option for anyone who's interested in doing that and understanding it more. And thank you again for helping to promote the role of forum and also trying to fill some of those vacancies that we've got. So I hope you all have a good end of term when it comes and a good break, whatever that looks like for you. So